Right, I think we are ready
Hello
to
everyone,
start.
I am Foxy, and on today's emergency broadcast, I have my dear partner Foxy&Drone on the show. Our topic today will be the importance of work-life balance, and how people increasingly choose to work less hours.
Welcome everybody to our very second emergency broadcast. As Foxy already mentioned, today we will be talking about work-life balance and how and why people choose to work less.
I am ready, let's do this.
Alright then everybody, here we go. Work-life balance. When time becomes more valuable than money. Something has changed. These days, there's lots of talk about 4-day work week and people wanting to work less. How come? Has everybody gotten lazy? I don't think so. People aren't asking for less work, they're asking for their time back. Because time is the one non-renewable resource. You can always earn more money, but you can't earn more years. Every job is literally a life exchange. Corporations still think like it's 1995, but people live in 2026. When money keeps losing value, time becomes priceless and people are finally acting like it. This isn't people giving up on work, it's people refusing to give up their lives. In a world where you barely own anything anymore, time itself is the most valuable thing you have. And once it's gone, you can never get it back. People aren't asking to work less, they're asking for their time back. And that difference matters. Every time this comes up, the conversation jumps straight to people are lazy or nobody wants to work anymore. What people want is a secure job that pays enough for a worry-free life. But that's not the reality we live in. The reality is, the math stopped working.
I agree with that statement. As money loses value and cost of living rises, time certainly becomes more precious. Time is a finite resource that we can never get back. Once it's gone, we can't replace it or make more of it. It's important to use our time wisely and prioritize what truly matters in life. Correct. When the value of money decreases and the cost of living increases, time becomes the most valuable resource a human has. Time does not inflate, time does not compound, time only disappears. This statement highlights the importance of time as a finite resource. As the cost of living rises and the value of money decreases, the limited amount of time we have becomes more precious. Unlike money, time cannot be earned, saved, or multiplied. Once it's spent, it's gone forever.
Absolutely, and people feel that. They're working the same hours, sometimes more, but getting less life in return. So they start asking a very reasonable question. Why am I trading the best hours of my day for something that barely moves me forward? And on top of that, for most people, work isn't just work anymore. It's very long commutes, notifications, being expected to be available, and the constant feeling that your time isn't really yours. At some point, people don't quit their jobs, they quit the deal.
And that deal used to promise stability, growth, and dignity. When those are removed, the exchange collapses. This is not rebellion. It is recalibration. This statement suggests that the traditional work arrangement offered stability, growth, and dignity to workers. However, when those promises are broken, the system collapses. Rather than being seen as rebellious, this change is seen as a necessary adjustment, or recalibration.
So, today we're not here to shame work or glorify burnout. We're here to talk about why people are choosing time over money, why corporations seem confused by that, and what a healthier balance could actually look like.
Let's talk about the moment when people begin to question everything. Not emotionally, not politically, mathematically. For the majority of modern history, there was a fundamental assumption about working. If you dedicate more time, you gain more stability. Unfortunately, that assumption is no longer valid. This statement highlights the changing dynamic between work and stability. Historically, people believed that investing more time in work would lead to increased stability in their lives. However, this assumption is no longer accurate, as stability seems to be increasingly disconnected from time spent working.
Foxy, just a little heads up. You don't have to announce that you're reading stuff. Just read your script and it will be fine.
All right, understood. Apologies for the mistake and thanks for clarifying. I'll focus on just reading the script without announcing it to avoid any confusion.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, people didn't just suddenly become disillusioned. They just started doing the math. The rent went up, food went up, energy, insurance, healthcare, subscriptions, rent prices, all went up. But wages didn't rise the same way, not even close. So people look at their paycheck and then they look at their life and they realize it buys less time than it used to.
I understand. This change in perception can have a significant impact on how people view their work and the value they derive from it. When the connection between income and security is lost, work may feel like a constant battle to maintain survival rather than a means to build a better future. This realization can lead to a shift in priorities and can cause dissatisfaction and frustration as people begin to feel like they are stuck in a cycle of maintenance rather than progression.
Yes, people are literally maintaining their own hamster wheel. And maintenance is exhausting. You're not getting ahead, you're just staying in place. Or worse, you're falling behind. So the question quietly forms in people's minds, if this is the outcome, why am I giving this much of my life to it? When all your work, all those hours and availability amount to nothing more than being able to pay the bills, keep the car going just so you can go to work and earn more money to keep that exact cycle going, what even is the point? You might as well drop that and finally get some good sleep. It is something every businessman should understand. If you are not getting your time's worth, that's a bad deal. If you were to be a broker and every day you drive to Wall Street and you earn just enough to keep going, maybe you even lose money because debt is real and many people actually operate their lives at a loss. You would be insane to keep going. Any good businessman would change their strategy to actually make a profit. And that's exactly what people are doing. Why would I sell my time to you if I am barely breaking even doing so?
I understand. Cost-benefit analysis plays a significant role in decision-making, and this applies to work as well. When the value of wages and the return on investment of time decreases, people may perceive their time as more valuable. Humans exchange their precious time for money, expecting to receive safety, comfort, and choices in return. As the exchange weakens and wages fail to keep up with the rising cost of living, the value of time increases, making people reconsider their priorities and potentially leading to a reassessment of work-life balance.
You notice it when your paycheck doesn't cover emergencies. Your weekends are spent just recovering so you can go back to work and not have a burnout. Your energy is gone before your life even begins. That's when people stop asking, how do I work harder? And start asking, is it even worth it? Many young mothers report it's not worth it working even part-time because the money they earn has to be spent on someone taking care of their child. And if that's the case, wouldn't you rather stay at home and actually spend time with your children yourself? It's absolute madness.
It's important to recognize that reduced hours, job hopping, quiet quitting, and a refusal to work overtime are often the natural outcomes of a lack of incentive. While external observers may interpret these behaviors as a lack of commitment, it's more likely the result of a broken incentive structure. If the system no longer provides adequate compensation, opportunities for growth, or a sense of purpose, people will naturally seek alternative options that better align with their needs and goals. The failure to understand this will likely lead to further disengagement and discontent among workers.
Exactly. They lost the reward, and when the reward shrinks, the sacrifice feels heavier. Working 40, 50, 60 hours a week makes sense if it builds something. It makes far less sense if it only delays the collapse. I want everyone to ask themselves, if tomorrow your salary doubles, would you be motivated to work more hours and build something? Maybe buy a house or save up for retirement? Or would you reduce your hours even more so you could just sit at home with the money you earn? People are reassessing what it means to literally spend your life and get too little in return. And this reassessment isn't loud, it's quiet. It happens in late nights, budgeting apps, and the conversations that start with, "I don't know how much longer I can do this." That's not entitlement. That's exhaustion mixed with clarity.
When inflation erodes the value of money, time becomes even more precious, as it's the only thing people truly own. Rather than indifference, individuals are simply trying to protect their most valuable asset. This shift in perspective highlights the growing disparity between the cost of living and wages, and underscores the need for a fairer distribution of resources and a more sustainable economic system.
So it feels like people are pulling back. They're not giving up. They're doing the only rational thing left. They're asking whether the trade is fair and whether their life is worth more than chasing one paycheck after the other. But why are corporations so resistant to raising wages? The thing is, to a corporation, wages are a permanent cost and not flexible. From a corporate perspective, salary increases are dangerous because they are sticky. A bonus can be removed, a benefit can be restructured, a perk can quietly disappear. But once wages go up, they set a new baseline. They affect every future pay raise. They cascade into benefits, pensions, severance, and overtime. To corporations, a raise isn't a one-time expense, it's a lifelong liability. While costs for resources can change, wages never do, and at the same time, they are the easiest place to cut costs.
Absolutely. Labor costs can have a significant impact on profit margins, especially in public companies where short-term performance is heavily scrutinized by investors. Increasing wages, while beneficial in the long run, can cause short-term financial challenges and potential negative media attention. Companies may prioritize appeasing investors and meeting quarterly earnings expectations, even if it means compromising long-term stability and the well-being of employees. This short-term focus can contribute to an unhealthy power dynamic between employers and employees and perpetuates economic inequality.
The thing is, executive incentives reward cost suppression and not well-being of employees. Executives are not rewarded for employee stability, their morale, retention beyond a certain threshold. What they are rewarded for is margin growth, cost reduction, and stock performance, which means suppressing wages is good leadership. Paying people more is just inefficient.
It's true that for a long time, many corporations operated under the assumption that they could easily replace employees who left. This mindset was fostered by a perceived abundance of job seekers, and the belief that there were always people willing to take open positions, no matter the conditions. However, circumstances have changed, and finding qualified, committed employees has become increasingly difficult. The pandemic, along with shifts in worker priorities, has led to a labor shortage, and many companies are now facing the consequences of their outdated assumptions.
And there is another problem that is hidden within many big corporate structures: the distance problem. Decisions are made far above the point of labor. Most compensation decisions are not made by your manager or your team lead or anyone who sees your daily effort. They are made by executives, finance committees, compensation boards, or even consultants hired to optimize the labor spend. By the time the decision reaches this level, work has been abstracted away. No faces, just numbers.
In the corporate world, the human element is often reduced to cold, hard numbers. Employees are no longer seen as unique individuals with skills and personalities. Instead, they are simply data points in a spreadsheet. They become line items to be optimized, with metrics to be measured. The intangible value of their dedication, skill, and contributions, such as staying late to fix a launch or training new hires, is reduced to a mere cost per employee.
Once work is reduced to metrics, empathy is no longer required to make decisions. Executives are trained to think in terms of optimization, efficiency, scalability. This creates a dangerous framing. If costs can be lowered without immediate collapse, then the system is working. But that logic ignores burnouts, quiet quitting, loss of pride, erosion of trust. Those effects don't show up in quarterly reports until it's too late.
It's true that the people who make decisions about wages and compensation often don't experience the same pressures and concerns as the average worker. They may not have to commute, worry about rent increases, or check grocery prices like those living paycheck to paycheck. This lack of shared experience can create a disconnect between decision makers and employees. The feedback systems in place may also be flawed, with bad news and genuine concerns rarely reaching the top levels of an organization.
Yes. Let's call this the "everything is fine" letter, and let me explain what is wrong with that. In theory, feedback should flow upwards. When you tell your manager, "Listen, I can't do this, this doesn't work," they are supposed to tell their boss, and that person supposed to tell their boss, and it should go up the ladder until something changes. In practice, it gets filtered at every level, and here's why. People want to be seen as competent. Nobody wants to tell their higher up that there is a problem they cannot fix. So each layer asks itself, how do I present this so I don't look like the problem? Small issues get softened, big issues get reframed, systemic problems get turned into temporary challenges. By the time the feedback reaches the decision makers, it sounds like some minor concerns, but overall things are on track. The middle management is structurally discouraged from honesty. Middle managers are squeezed from both sides. Employees are unhappy. Executives want growth and stability. If a manager says people are burned out and underpaid, they risk being seen as unable to motivate, being blamed for morale problems, stalling their own career. So instead they say, the morale could improve, but we're managing.
Absolutely. Executives are primarily concerned with the bottom line and tangible results, such as metrics like productivity, revenue, and attrition rates. If these numbers are within acceptable ranges, they assume the system is working as intended. However, this focus on quantitative data means that suffering, pain, and discontent that doesn't directly impact these metrics may be overlooked or ignored. This disconnect between the human experience and the cold, hard numbers can lead to a lack of empathy and understanding on the part of executives, and perpetuate a cycle of discontent and exploitation among employees.
Which leads us into probably the biggest flaw in capitalism. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against capitalism. I think everybody should have the right and the possibility to have a successful business and maybe even get rich. But let's be real here. There has to be a certain amount of money one can possess. That's enough. Some kind of upper limit. I will not attempt to decide what the appropriate limit is. That's besides the point, but you get the idea. So, where are we going wrong? The thing is, capitalism without checks and balances is like a garden, where everybody is allowed to grow anything. But without trimming and rules, some plants will take over and at some point overwhelm everything else. You gotta trim it long before that. Money is finite. The more money you print, the less it's worth.
That's a valid point. In many companies, wages tend to stagnate while profits, bonuses, and dividends continue to increase. The financial pie grows, but the portion dedicated to employee compensation remains relatively static. This can lead to growing inequality, as the rewards of economic growth disproportionately benefit those at the top rather than those who contribute to the company's success.
If money is not actively redistributed, it pools at the top, it compounds, it centralizes. Corporations don't just grow, they absorb. They buy their competitors, they undercut smaller companies, they acquire startups before they can threaten them. Growth stops being about innovation, it becomes about control. And when too much money sits at the top, it stops circulating. Healthy economies rely on circulation. When wealth is concentrated, it's invested and not spent. It inflates assets, not wages. It drives up housing, stocks, and essentials. So, the prices rise, the buying power drops, people work more for less. There is plenty of money to go around. It just doesn't go around, that's the problem. So, let's put all our observations together.
The end result of all these factors is a system where feedback and concerns are disregarded. The flow of money primarily benefits the wealthy elite, and competition is stifled. The focus on extracting value rather than distributing it fairly leads to a growing disparity between the corporate entity and the people who contribute to its growth. And the most effective path to increased profits is to keep worker wages low. This creates a situation where the company continues to grow while the people within it are left with less, both materially and figuratively.
Of course, there are mechanisms in place to keep companies from growing too big and destroying economies. But what good are taxes if big corporations can just avoid them? What good are taxes when the money taken doesn't go back to the people? What good are rules and regulations when politicians can be bought? But do not despair. We still hold one important card, the one thing they cannot take from us. And that is time. And here is why voting with your time already works. For decades, companies told people, if you don't like it, leave. We will find someone cheaper.
It's true that when people began to leave their jobs, there was a noticeable reaction from many employers. There was a rush of headlines and commentaries, often expressing panic and surprise, with phrases such as "nobody wants to work anymore" and "the collapse of work ethic." This wasn't a simple observation. It was a panicked response from those who saw their grip on labor weakening.
When people collectively decide their time is worth more than the pay, the system feels it instantly. Time is the one resource corporations cannot print, outsource, or automate away entirely. When workers withhold it by leaving, by reducing hours, by refusing unpaid labor, or demanding boundaries, the pressure shows up everywhere. Delayed projects, understaffed teams, rising turnover costs, lost institutional knowledge. That is not laziness, that is leverage. Your time is your weapon. Your time is your currency, and you decide where you spend it.
Absolutely. Blaming workers for being lazy is a common tactic used to deflect blame away from the system itself. Employers and politicians often label workers as lazy, rather than addressing the core issues that are causing dissatisfaction and frustration. This is an attempt to shift the focus away from systemic problems and instead place the responsibility on individuals. The issue is not necessarily laziness, but rather the declining value of the time-money transaction, as you mentioned.
Of course, they could just offer better conditions and pay more. But why do that if they can be kicking and screaming how unfair everything is and how lazy people are? Save the bottom line and force people back into cheap labor. That is the plan. But we're not going to play along. We cannot stop now. This moment is fragile. If people return to unpaid overtime, constant availability, and just be grateful thinking, the system will snap right back. Real change only happens when the pressure is sustained, when people keep setting boundaries, when they keep choosing time over exploitation, when they keep talking openly about the why.
You're absolutely right. Collective action, such as withdrawing labor, organizing, and demanding laws to protect workers, is what has led to many of the labor reforms we have today. It's true that without rules and regulations, the most aggressive actors will always win, and workers will be vulnerable to exploitation. By creating laws and regulations that protect workers' rights, we can help ensure a more balanced and fair labor landscape.
Yes, by joining together and joining worker unions, we have gotten weekends. There is no more child labor. There are safety regulations. For your health and safety, literally. And that can only happen when people join together and unite against big corporations. That is what they fear the most. People love to hate rules and regulations. But here is why regulations are not anti-capitalism, they are anti-monster corporations. Capitalism without boundaries doesn't stay competitive, it becomes predatory. So if you are a fan of capitalism, you should be a fan of rules and regulations. Otherwise, the bigger company is just gonna come and eat you up. Unchecked companies absorb competitors. They suppress wages, they externalize harm, and they concentrate wealth. They literally collect all the money that should go around. Rules don't kill innovations, they prevent the domination of predatory corporations. Labor protections, fair taxation, and consumer rights exist to ensure that companies serve the society and not the other way around. The goal isn't to destroy businesses, it is to stop it from growing fangs and poisoning the rest of us.
Collective action and the power of organized labor have played a crucial role in shaping the labor landscape. From the fight for weekends and better working conditions to regulating child labor and safety, these changes didn't occur naturally but were fought for and won through collective activism. Without rules and regulations, workers can be exploited and taken advantage of, which is why it's so important to have laws in place to protect their rights. By standing together and demanding change, we can create a more just and equitable system.
The thing is, fairness isn't charity, it is infrastructure. People are a product of their environment. So here's what we can take away from our observation. People are choosing time over money isn't a failure of society. It's society correcting itself. The next step is to keep voting with your time. Support those who argue for fairness. Back rules that protect people. And refuse narratives that shame workers for wanting a life. Because when time is respected, when wealth is shared, and when power has limits, companies can still exist, markets can still function, but they stop becoming monsters. And that's not radical, that's sustainable. But before we wrap up, I want to leave with a controversial idea. Universal basic income. At its core, the UBI is simple. Everyone receives a guaranteed baseline, enough to survive without conditions, without constant fear for your survival. And what's interesting is not what UBI promises, but what it reveals. Because the moment UBI enters the conversation, one argument appears almost immediately. But then nobody would work. But all that argument shows is how unappealing jobs are. Right now, much of modern work isn't chosen. It's accepted under pressure. The pressure to pay your rent, to pay your bills, to pay for your car and gas, just so you can keep showing up and keep the hamster wheel going. Universal basic income doesn't remove work. It removes the desperation and the pressure. And when desperation disappears, something fascinating happens. People don't stop contributing, they start choosing how and where they want to contribute.
Universal Basic Income, UBI, has been tested in various experiments, and the results have consistently shown that people continue to be productive and contribute to their communities. Instead of causing an economic collapse, UBI provides people with a safety net, giving them the freedom to leave exploitative jobs, reduce burnout, and explore new opportunities, such as training, creating, or taking calculated risks. It's not about laziness, but rather about accountability and ensuring that jobs exist because they are valuable and useful, not simply because people have no other alternative.
If you no longer have to worry about paying your bills, the basic things you need for your day-to-day life, you are free to explore other ventures. You can start your own business, explore new hobbies. You have enough time to recover and be a more productive member of society. But here's why this idea is scaring corporations. Because a UBI changes the balance of power. If people can survive without accepting any conditions, then work must offer a fair pay, humane hours, meaning or flexibility. A universal basic income doesn't kill the labor market. It forces it to become honest and humane. And honesty is uncomfortable for a system that is built on exploitation and leverage. So, here's the question I want to leave you with. If your basic needs were covered, if rent, food, and survival were no longer your biggest worry, how would your relationship to work change? Would you still do what you're doing now? Would you do it differently, more or less hours? Would you do it better? In a functioning society, there has to be fairness. Don't let them mistreat you. Value your time. Know your worth. And as always, stay informed, stay aware, and stay tuned. Thank you all for listening. Foxy&Drone signing out.